Next up, we have Thamindu Gamage, who will be giving us an introduction to REST API and frameworks. The screen is all yours, Thamindu.
Okay, so first of all, I welcome you guys all to the ITP Guide 4.0. I am Thamindu Gamage, a third-year undergraduate student who's going to doing software engineering as specialization. I'm a committee member of Faculty of Computing student community, and as well as I'm a member of MS Club of SLIIT. So
small interruption. So guys, if you have any questions regarding the session or regarding the ITP project, ITP module, or any other questions, so you can post it in the chat box. So we will answer those questions. Thank you.
Okay.
You can continue.
Okay, thank you, Sinodya. So that's all about myself. So actually, I'm here to talk about. I'm actually here to give you a brief introduction about REST API and frameworks. So I have divided this session into two parts. First, I'm going to talk about REST API, and in its REST API part, I'm going to talk what is REST API, how the REST API work, and all the other things mentioned in here. And for the frameworks part, I'm going to talk about what are frameworks, what is technology stack, and all the other parts mentioned here. So without any further ado, let's move on to introduction to REST API. So what is actually REST API? So REST API is a way of accessing web services in a simple and flexible way without having any processing. You know what is processing, right? You have learned it in first year and second year also. So actually REST technology is a generally preferred technology because REST uses less bandwidth and it is simple and flexible, making more suitable for internet usage. You know what, that internet is very fast and very vast. You need to get request here and so quickly. So it is actually best used for internet usage. So you know that when using internet, we are used to fetch or give some information from a website service. We are getting information from most of the time web services. Finally, you have to remember that all communications done via REST API only uses HTTP request. You guys have to remember that point. Let us move on to a real world problem. So now I'm going to explain to you more about REST API using a real world problem, world scenario. So yes. So have you guys ever been to a restaurant? I'm pretty sure you guys have. So let us take three roles in that restaurant: customers, waiters, and chefs. So first, the customer goes to the restaurant and there he gets on a table. So on the table, there is a menu card actually. So the customer goes through the menu card and selects something that he needs to get as his meal. Then he calls the waiter. The waiter comes to the customer and he writes down what the meal that the customer needs. Then the waiter goes to the kitchen and tells the chef that this customer needs this meal, right? So after getting the information from the waiter, the chef checks whether this meal can be prepared or not. If the meal cannot be prepared, the chef informs the waiter to tell the customer that this meal cannot be prepared. Otherwise, if the meal can be prepared, the chef starts to prepare the meal. After finishing preparing the meal, the chef again calls the waiter to take the prepared meal back to the customer. And the waiter comes to the chef and then he takes the meal back to the customer. So that is actually what's happening in a restaurant, right? So we can also compare this to an API. We can take customer as the front end, chef as the back end, and waiter as the API. So that's all for this scenario. And let's move on to how the API, REST API works. So first of all, a request is sent from a client to a server in the form of a web service. So it can be a HTTP request or URL. This request is sent through a browser. You know different browsers, right? Like you know Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari. These are actually the browsers we use to surf the internet. So these are the actually front end for the users. We enter our details through these browsers. So then from the request that user enters is fetched by the API. After that, API sends this request to the server. When sending this request, API just sometimes set rules for interacting, and API also handles data transfer. Those things are also done by the API. So you guys know that the databases are stored in servers, right? So a response is coming back from the server in the form of resource, which can be anything like HTML, XML, image, or JSON. But you have to remember, these days, JSON is the most popular format being used in web services. So these days, JSON is the most popular thing for fetch information to a web server. So when the expanded meaning of REST API is actually representational state transfer. So let us move on. So these are actually the different client API requests that sent from the client's browsers. You know, GET request, POST request, PUT request, DELETE request. So actually, the GET request is used to receive information and about an API resource. So like it is requesting. So we are storing, we have stored something in a database. We are retrieving the stored data from a database to our use. So that is actually the GET request. So what about POST? POST is like we are sending our new data source into a database. It is actually as you can see, create an API resource. So there is no such data existed before in the database. So we are entering new data. So what is actually PUT? So you have entered new data to the database using POST request, right? So that data is needed to be modified or something. So you need to send the new modified data for the existing data, not new data. It is existing data as a PUT request. So if you send the newly modified data as a PUT request, it's going to update the API resource. So that means it's going to update the data. It's going to replace the new old data with the new data in the database. So that's for PUT request. So what is this delete request? So delete request is, you know, it's going to remove something from the database or from file. So you know you deleted files in your browser, desktop, laptops, and all those things now. So actually delete request in API is used to delete data inside a database. So that's all. So this is how the API works according to different client requests. So there you can see GET request, POST request, PUT request, and delete request. So according to this client request, the REST API is going to respond to the server. So these requests are requests from the APIs is going as HTTP request. I have previously mentioned you about this thing. So you can see in API, it's going to send the data as HTTP request. The server is going to respond to the API as also like an HTTP request, HTTP response. So like that, the REST API is working. So you can see after fetching data from the as HTTP response from the REST API, it's going to send the data back to the client in JSON, XML, or HTML form. I have previously told you guys that. So this is how actually the API works according to different client requests. So let's move on. So let us move on to third party API. So before moving on, I would like to ask you, do you guys know about third party? Most of you guys, maybe all of you guys know about third party. So actually third party is, for the simple meaning, is a third party is an individual or entity that is involved in the facilitation of a transaction, but neither one of the primary parties. So you guys know when you are little, your brother or sister with you are arguing, you guys are arguing. So for a particular reason, so you can't come to a conclusion. So you are asking your parent or guardian to help you guys out in this problem. So you guys are asking your parent to come to help us or something like that. So then parent come. So after going through your scenario, they are giving you a best solution. So if we take this scenario, you and your brother or sister are the primary parties and your parent is the third party. So that's, I think that covers all about third party, right? So when it comes to the API or programming, so this also applies to the API. So let us move on. So think there is a primary developer who develops backend and front end in a particular system, and they need to improve their developed systems productivity by adding new features. In order to do that, they are using someone else's already implemented software piece of software. So this using software or software piece is also known as third-party API. Sometimes this software is the third-party API, or this software in the software can be a software piece that could also be the third-party API. So think of this like there is a native developer. So some system is developed by a software engineer team. So they are using their own backend and front-end frameworks. So to increase their productivity, they are using a already implemented software. So third-party developers software community is going to help to increase the productivity of the original system that is being implemented by the software engineers of the system. So I'm going to explain you guys about that in an example. So do you guys actually use PickMe app also? I know you guys have used PickMe app or Uber app also. In that PickMe app, you guys know that you can register and you can search for vehicles and you can see for the available drivers, also those things. So you guys seen that in this PickMe app, you can see a map. In this map, there are little bit of vehicles here and there, three-wheelers, tuk-tuks and bicycles, those things. You can see vehicles going here and there. So PickMe app is only developing their system for the registering purposes, booking purposes, and all those things. So the map feature, they are getting it from the Google Maps. So Google Maps, it's actually an API. So Google API is used by PickMe developers to increase the productivity of their application. So that's how the third-party APIs come to action. So let's move on. So these are the well-known third-party APIs. I have previously mentioned Google Maps, PayPal, and Google Calendar. So you guys know PayPal, right? So if you are using eBay also, you guys know what is PayPal. So same goes to the other third-party APIs. So that concludes about third-party APIs. So now let us move on to Postman. So what is actually Postman? When talking about Postman is an API platform for building and using APIs. And Postman simplifies each step of the API lifecycle and it streamlines collaboration so you can create better APIs. So if you want to create better APIs, you have to use Postman. So Postman is used by developers to create, share, test, and sometimes document APIs. So this is done by allowing users to create and save simple and complex HTTP requests, as well as read their responses. So Postman is actually for testing purposes mostly. So by Postman, you can actually create HTTP requests and read their responses. So let me demonstrate this to you. So now let's move on to Postman application. I'm going to open my Postman application. So you guys can see my Postman application here. So I have previously mentioned that you can create collections, do different kind of things with Postman. So this is actually for creating APIs, creating environments, mock servers, monitors, and all the other things. So you can do lots of things here, but I can't actually explain all of these things to you. So I'm going to now demonstrate to you how the REST API works in Postman. So let's see. So you can see here, there are different kinds of HTTP requests. So you can see GET request, POST request, and PUT request, delete request. So batch request, those things are here. So what I have previously explained you that GET request can be used to retrieve information, right? So first I'm going to send my GET request to the database. So you can see it right here. So look at this. I have entered some test data to my server as the for demonstration. So you guys can see this is actually a document. I have get and document from the I have gotten a document from the database. So you can see here. So I need to add a new document. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go here and I'm going to switch it to POST request. So I have told you that POST request is used to save data, right? So I'm going to send it here. So you can see POST save successful. So what if I go to the GET request again, and if I send it here, then you can see my entered details are being stored in the database. So I have again sent the POST request, so GET request to retrieve the newly entered details. So then you guys can see this. So what if I delete this request from the database? So I'm going to delete it right here. So this is actually the post that I entered previously for new one as a new one. So I'm going to send it. So you can see editing is successful, right? So if I get the post again, you guys can see a newly entered post has been removed from the system. So that's how the REST API testing is done in Postman. So with that, I'm going to conclude my session, first part, that is about REST API. Now let us move on to introduction to frameworks. So what is actually framework? You guys see, you guys can see there's on the left-hand side, there is a wooden structure of a house, right? So in the right-hand side, there's actual house. So can you guys see a similarity between these two pictures? In the left-hand side, structure is actually similar to the right-hand side house. So you guys can get to a conclusion that the left-hand side wooden structure is the base of this right-hand side house. So this house is actually built based on the structure. So this is actually a framework. Left-hand side is actually a framework. So when think about yourself, so you are a human being, right? So in your body, you have some systems, digestive system, blood, veins, so those things. So what is the structure of your body? It's the actually skeletal system, right? So without the skeletal system, you guys can imagine what will happen, right? So skeletal system is the basic structure of our body. So like that, for the humans, our framework is skeleton. So like that, you guys can get an idea about what are frameworks generally. So this also applies to the programming as well. So what is framework in programming? A framework in programming is a tool that provides ready-made components or solutions. These solutions are customized in order to speed up development and other things. So a framework may include a library, but is defined by the principle of inversion of control. What is inversion of control? So in traditional programming, you know, the custom codes that the code that you have implemented goes into the library to access reusable code, right? So with inversion of control, it happens the backward. So inversion of control, the framework calls on custom pieces of code when necessary. So that's how the frameworks work. It calls when entering data to the when traditional programming you are calling the code and in the frameworks it happens backward. So let us move on. So what are libraries and frameworks? There are a lot of confusion in students as well as junior developers. There is a confusion between libraries and frameworks. So I'm going to talk about that thing as well. So actually, libraries provide developers with predefined functions and classes to make their work easier and boost their development process. Framework, on the other hand, is like a foundation upon which developers build applications to a specific platform. So if I explain it furthermore, frameworks are predefined. Changing the structure of a framework is not recommended, but we could change it. So on the other hand, for libraries, developers can change the libraries as they feel comfortable. It is more flexible than a framework. Some developers prefer libraries other than frameworks because of the independence of their developing process. Think of yourself as a developer now. Think of yourself as a developer. Simply we can put it like this. Libraries are called by you actually, but frameworks call you. That's the difference. Libraries are called by you and the frameworks are called to you. So think of it like this. You are given a set of tools, right? You have to clearly remember you are given a set of tools. You are using this tool to make something and this tool to make something. And with all those tools, you have developed something. That's a framework. In framework, you are actually given something. In library. So let us talk about libraries. In libraries, you are not given anything. You can choose whichever thing you want. You can choose if you want to do something, you can choose different tools. And let's think about building a chair. You can use drill or screwdriver to connect the chair hinges and all those things. So libraries are like that. You can use anything if like you want. So that's the difference between framework and a library. So I think you guys have a great idea about frameworks and libraries with these examples. So let us move on. So let us move on to what is technology stack. First, before moving on to the technology stack, do you know what is a stack? Stack is an arrangement of things kept in order one over the other. You guys have seen book stacks, CD stacks, most probably book stacks. The libraries, you can see tons of books stacked together. So If we move on to the technology stack, the technology stack is a set of technologies that are stacked together to build an application. Popularly known as a technology infrastructure or solution stack. Technology stack is also known as those things. And technology stack has become essential for building easy to maintain and scalable web applications. So we are using technology stack these days because we can use that to build easy to maintain and scalable web applications. So technology stack determines the type of applications you can build, the level of customizations you can perform, and the resources you need to develop your application. So actually, the modern technology stack has many components because of the increase of the number of devices from which users can access application and the huge volumes of events and data processing things. So before 20 years back, there are actually less devices, only office computers and button phones, most probably satellite phones are the best things. So in these days, you can see everyone has a mobile device, Android or iOS. So because of those things, the stacks are needed to be improved. So that's all. So then I also need to say in stacks that it might include tools for performance monitoring, data lakes, and microservices. So in later this session, you guys will learn about what are microservices. So so you should actually choose the technology stack you want to use based on your project needs and other factors. If the technology stack you should also consider about your developing teams knowledge and other things. So most probably not knowledge, it's about enthusiasm, right? So with that, let's move on. This is what technology stack consists of. Technology stack consists of client side and server side, also known as front end and the back end. As for the client side, you can use Bootstrap, React.js, and other mentioned things here to implement the front side of your application. And for the backend, you can use libraries like libraries mentioned here and frameworks, Node.js, Express.js, and all those things, and databases to develop your server side. So that's all. So how to choose stack based on the requirements? So if you're making a small project for like for office management system, so like that. So you guys can use Python, Django, Node.js, React stack. Those things you can use for small projects. For mid-sized projects, you can use Mean, MERN, or LAM. Actually, LAM requires more complex stack with several layers and different languages. So for large projects, you can use AngularJS, Node.js, Python, Django, or Ruby on Rails. Much higher requirements to the scalability, speed, and maintainability. So you can use those things. Other things, you can read the other things as well. So you have to choose your stack based on the project requirements. That's the most important thing. So let us move on. So now I'm going to give you guys an introduction to Springboard, Django, Vue.js, Fast API, MERN, Mean, and Maven. So first, let us start with Springboard. Actually, Springboard is an open source Java-based web framework used to create a microservice, and it is used to build standalone and production-grade Spring applications. And I have to say, Springboard provides a good platform for Java developers to develop standalone and production-grade Spring applications. So you can get started with minimum configurations without the need of an entire Spring configuration setup. So if you are using Spring Boot, I think you have to learn about Spring Boot more efficiently. So let us move on to Django then. Django is an open source framework for backend actually. So Django is a framework for backend web application based on Python. It is actually based on Python that follows model template views architectural pattern. So in your project, if you're using machine learning such thing, you should go with Django because Django is a Python-based web framework. So that concludes the introduction to Django. So let us move on to Vue.js then. So Vue.js is a JavaScript framework for building user interfaces. So it's actually a front-end framework. So it builds on top of standard HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it provides a declarative and component-based programming model that helps you efficiently develop user interfaces. So I have told you about front-end. It's a front-end framework. So Vue.js is simple. Not Vue.js. User interfaces may be simple or complex. Vue.js is a framework, an ecosystem that covers most of the common features needed in front-end development. But the web is extremely diverse. The things we build on web may vary drastically in form and scale. So because of that, Vue.js is designed to be flexible and incrementally adaptable. So now let us move on to Fast API. So what is actually Fast API? Fast API is actually a modern fast web framework for building APIs with Python language. Actually, it is using Python 3.6 plus based on standard Python hints. So Fast API is very fast, very high performance. It has very high performance. It is actually very fast comparing to Node.js. Fast API is actually one of the fastest Python frameworks available. It is very fast to code. It has fewer bugs and it gets less time debugging. So easy to build, easy to implement, short, and it is robust. Actually, Fast API is standard based. So what is standard based? So Fast API is actually based on the open standards for APIs and JSON schema. So let us move on to MERN, mean, and meven now. So you guys can see a similarity here. So in MERN, mean, and meven, MEN in these three libraries are the same. For M, it's MongoDB, E, Express, and Node.js. So for the front end, they are using React as in MERN, AngularJS in mean, and Vue.js in meven. So you guys have to remember these three stacks are using same backend frameworks. The only difference is here is the front end. In MERN, they are using React, as I previously mentioned. So React is a library, Angular in mean, and Vue.js in meven. So that's all for these three. So now let us move on. Now I'm going to talk about SQL versus NoSQL. You guys have learned SQL in first year and second years, right? So SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Then it's the domain-specific language used in programming, and you guys know how to use the SQL. You guys have done queries. You have done database programming, all those things in second year. So you guys also know how to handle Microsoft SQL Server. So the new thing is for some of you guys here is NoSQL. So NoSQL stands for not only SQL, and NoSQL databases store data in documents rather than relational tables. So NoSQL provides a mechanism for storage and retrieval of data that is modeled in means other than tabular relations used in relational databases. So let us contrast these things and you can get a clear idea about these things. So moving on. So SQL versus NoSQL. So I have previously mentioned you that SQL is a RDBMS, relational database management system, and NoSQL is a non-relational distributed database system. So for SQL, you are using tables and rows and columns, all these things. For the NoSQL, you guys are using documents. There are no tables, rows, or columns, such things. So for the second point, these databases have fixed or static predefined schema in SQL. So NoSQL, they have dynamic schema. So what is this? If you guys have static requirements, like your scope is clearly set from the beginning of your project, if you guys are having a static scope that it is not never it is rarely changing, you guys have to go with SQL. If your scope is changing frequently, and if you guys have changing requirements, and if you guys have a dynamic schema, you have to go with NoSQL. So that's about the second point. You guys can read three other points. And finally, I would like to tell you that I have previously mentioned that you guys know most of the time. For SQL, you can use MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle as SQL database management systems. For NoSQL, MongoDB, GraphQL, HBase, Neo4j, Cassandra, and other things like Firebase you can use for NoSQL. So let us move on. This is actually a SQL schema, left-hand side, and right-hand side you can see a SQL document, NoSQL document. So in SQL schema, you guys can see there is a table. You can see in this table, you can see this is actually a MS SQL server diagram. So you can see in here there are tables and rows and columns, and all the data arranges as tuples. So see the difference. In NoSQL document, you guys can't see any tables or rows or columns, right? This only identification is here. The ID is number one, first ID, right? So this is actually a NoSQL document. So you guys can clearly see the difference between these two things. So now let us move on. This is exactly the importance of using documentation, right? So for my personal experience, I have used documentation widely when I'm developing things. I am looking things, right? So documentation helps junior developers and new team members feel confident jumping to code base. So if you are new to the subject, if you are new to the library or framework, you have to go with the documentation, right? So it makes the confidence in junior developers and new team members. And I have to say the documentations are always getting updated. If there is a new patch coming to the web, it's always updated. So the documentations have fewer bugs actually. So in the new patches are frequently coming, so the web documentations are going updated. So it is also written by senior software engineers, and the knowledge of them is going to cover up all the junior developers problems. So, and I would like to say that since tech documentation can, as I mentioned you, latest updated details, bugs and flaws are reduced. So for my personal experience, like think you are watching a video from 2020 in YouTube. So after that particular video, there might come so much different patches and updates to the documentation. So what is the use of watching an old YouTube video? if you are going through the documentation, you are getting the newest knowledge. That's very important, right? So now I'm going to show you actually a documentation site. You guys can see, right? So this is actually the React documentation. For my personal experience, I have learned React from this documentation. I have read the entire documentation and I have tried all the codes here. So that's how I mastered React. So you can get a brief knowledge from the first blogs, and from the other ones you can actually get the deeper knowledge. You can learn from scratch actually. So from here in the hello world problem, you can learn from the basic. You guys know the hello world is the most basic program implementation, right? So from the hello world you can use to make more robust complete React applications from here. So you guys have to go with the documentation. Otherwise, you would stop at some point in your knowledge. So I'm recommending you guys to go through these, and I'm encouraging you guys to try these. So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening. And I hope you guys do your IT projects very well, and wish you guys all the best for your work. Over to you, Gahan. Thank you.
Thank you for that enlightening speech, Thamindu Ayya.